My topic is digitizing the in-store experience, and that's looking at how companies are using digital technology in-store to interact with consumers. And the one stat that's most relevant for me on that is this notion of digitally influenced sales. So I think people have seen a lot of stats like this floating around, but the idea is that as channels converge, it gets harder and harder to measure where customers are getting the information, even to some extent where you can credit sales to. Because just because a sale is happening online or happening in the store, it doesn't mean that's where the information is originating from. And for my line of work, this stat is phenomenally important, that of the three major channels that we're talking about, e-commerce, physical stores, and this digital influence, you can see pretty clearly that the dominant growing influence is in the digital realm. So what I decided to look at was just some key examples of how companies are using this. And there are a lot. This isn't exhaustive, but I chose 5 areas that I thought were an interesting cross-section of different things companies are doing. And I'm not going to go through this in great detail because I want to get to 2 specific case studies. But the way I structured my paper was looking at 1 to 2 examples of each of these of how I think what I see as industry leaders are using it. But just as a highlight, so mobile POS, this is the idea that the checkout process and the information process in store doesn't have to be just standing at a cash register at the end of your transaction. I think particularly department stores are doing a really good job of having the shopping experience and the information gathering experience happen all throughout the store. Nordstrom's is a really good example of equipping their associates with iPad apps and having them go into the field, if you will, and give information to customers about the products and then allow them to check out right there. Digital signage is a fairly broad category, but this is using, it's things like interactive displays in stores that might either be motion detected. Nike's done some really cool stuff with this, or just allowing there to be a variety of messaging that's being given to consumers. Beacon marketing. Again, I think this is one that some department stores and malls are using really well. And what it basically allows stores to do is to have more information sharing going on between them in store and the customers that are coming in, so they can customize the experience as it's happening. Touch display is one of my favorites, and I'll talk some about it, but this is sort of related to digital signage in a more interactive way. So the example that I like to look at for this is something that Kate Spade Saturday did, where they had basically a pop-up shop, a rent out of a store in New York City, and the whole thing was just one big digital touchscreen. And it was motion sensing, and you could go up and you could explore products, and then in certain scenarios you could order them and have them delivered to you in less than 2 hours. A lot of, I think, operational issues that go into that, and I'll talk about that, but an interesting example. And the last one is smart fitting rooms, which is, I think, particularly relevant for fashion brands and athletic brands. So the idea here is that instead of just going in and trying on a product and then you're no longer with the associate, you're no longer with information, you can use the fitting room setting as a dynamic environment. So in an ideal scenario, that's you walk in with the latest dress from a fashion retailer, and on the walls, clips from Fashion Week start playing of that product or the products that influenced it. So I want to dig in a little bit deeper to 2 specific examples, and of course one of them is going to be New Balance. So I actually think this is a really good example. So New Balance launched a custom kiosk. So it was this physical machine that they had originally put out in Foot Locker, and now they have it in their own stores, which allowed customers to go up and design their own pair of 574s, which is it's New Balance's flagship lifestyle shoe. And so the consumers could see all the different product options and whatnot and go through and design their shoe, and it would then link to the order management system and the manufacturing systems, and these products were being manufactured in the US, so in best case scenarios it could be delivered within 2 days. So a lot of, again, interesting operational things there. But I talked with Ashley Mitchell, who's a woman that I work with who is in charge of this project, and there were 2 really interesting things that she said as it relates to this project. One, she said an unexpectedly large effect was the halo effect of having other sales of 574s. So in a lot of examples, people would go up and design product and then not make the purchase, but they saw an uptick of related products. So I think that's an interesting example of where the measurement gets really hard, because if you weren't accounting for the custom kiosk, you'd just say, for whatever other reasons, sales bumped that day. So it's important to attribute it. The second thing that she said is, from an executional standpoint, there were a ton of issues with linking different data systems. And if you think about the relationship between, the traditional relationship between your retail channel, your manufacturing, and order management, it's not very often that manufacturing and the end retail store are talking to each other in live time and in that kind of detail. So they had a lot of challenges figuring out how to get that information to flow correctly, to flow on time, particularly considering that very fast delivery was one of the things that they were promising. And then the second example I want to give is something that Burberry did during London Fashion Week. So they were calling this retail theater. And if the New Balance example is really focused on the transactional element of in-store technology, the Burberry example is much more focused on customer and brand engagement. So basically what they did is I think it was 25 of their stores across the world, during London Fashion Week, they invited specific consumers to come in and experience the show in store. And so this is everything from having interviews and the runway being projected up on screens, to equipping all the customers that came with iPads that had all sorts of additional information and brand engagement and just different ways to feel involved in the process. And what I think is particularly cool here and ties into what Alex is going to talk about is they started experimenting with some virtual reality things with this. So that was using the store as like the physical setting to gather, but then allowing people to experience the show in even a more personal touch. So when I was going through this project, Patrick asked me, okay, this is cool, I love the examples. What's the takeaway for what retailers can do with it? And I think the tough reality is that they're sort of endless, and it depends on what is your brand trying to accomplish with your customers. And what I like about these two examples is that I think in both instances, the companies have said, okay, what's a differentiator that we have, whether it's American manufacturing and customizing product, or it's being part of the high fashion experience because our executives are there, our designers are there. They combined whatever they thought their strategic advantage was with the appropriate technology to engage with their consumers.